All right, I'd like to thank everybody for checking out this post-secondary transition plan training, as we're going to have a conversation today about some of the changes that have been made and how SRS is flexing to be able to meet some of those new needs. And so with us today is McKayla LaBorde of ESU 3, Minh Vu of the ESUCC, and he deals with SRS and kind of the functionality of that, and is going to share some things about the updated site, along with Megan Lantis at ESU 13, 16, and 17. And so very quickly, if each of you would just want to give a little bit more about kind of your backstory as we get into having this conversation.
Thanks, Andrew. We're so glad you're helping us with this today. We're excited to get this information out to everyone. We have a revised post-secondary transition plan that's going to be included within SRS, and this has been just a long time coming. I think we're all really excited about this opportunity. Something for me personally that I've been looking forward to for a long time. So as you mentioned, my name is McKayla LaBorde. I am a member of the SRS Advisory Committee. So the student record system is coordinated by the ESU Coordinating Council, and there are representatives throughout the state that serve on that SRS Advisory Board and just help guide some of the decision making, help support the developers and the technical staff as they continue to try to improve the product. And this SRS post-secondary transition plan revision is an example of that. This has been identified as a need throughout several regions. The entire state really has been, thinking that a revision to the transition plan would be a great deal. And so as a member of the SRS Advisory Committee and as someone who has a passion for post-secondary planning and knows how important it is that we provide that stellar planning for our students with disabilities, I volunteered for the project and am here today representing the SRS Advisory Committee. I also, my full-time job, my real job is as the Executive Director of Student Services here at ESU 3, serving the Omaha metro area. And this is my 4th year. I'm finishing that 4th year up and I'm really excited. So thank you so much for having me here today.
I'm Minh Vu, and I've been running the SRS help desk for the last 2 years, and I've been helping oversee and coordinate all of the changes and updates to SRS to make it an enjoyable process and efficient as possible, while also creating very compliant and quality IEPs.
Thanks a lot, Minh. And Megan.
Hello, I'm Megan Lantis. I come to you from the middle of the state. Well, I guess it'd probably be called more Western in North Platte. I'm one of the 6 regional transition facilitators that are put together throughout the state. We have 5 different regions. I'm part of the Western region, and I split that since we have such a big area with Jessica Broderick from ESU 13, and you'll be getting to meet a couple other of the gals that are part of our great group of transition facilitators. And I'm just super excited for what this SRS tool is going to do for transition and to help teachers out in terms of making sure that we're writing solid transition plans that are focusing on the end goal and that it's all tied together. It's not just pieced in different parts. So I'm excited to see how this rolls out and helps make everyone's lives a little bit easier.
Well, we all can certainly use that for sure in education with all the new things that get put on our plate and responsibilities that people have. So that being said, we'll kind of kick things off with this post-secondary transition plan conversation. We're going to break this conversation down into 3 parts. And so the first part will be training section 1. We're going to keep these kind of brief so that you'll be able to kind of watch these in chunks as needed. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn things over to McKayla.
Yeah, awesome, Andrew. Well, thank you so much. I talked about this a little bit in my introduction, but essentially you might be asking yourself, why update the SRS transition plan now, right? So there's a lot of things that have led to this. So first and foremost, we know that if you have a better template or tool for helping with your transition planning, which of course is a process, right? It's not a form, it's not a document. Transition planning is what's important for students, but we document that on an IEP or a post-secondary transition plan. And so better planning leads to better outcomes. We have a need to really continue to look at how we're serving our kiddos with disabilities in the state. And you may or may not know, the last year of data we have here in Nebraska, statewide from 2020, indicates that only 65% of students with disabilities graduated in 4 years, whereas general education students graduated at a rate of 88%. So just knowing there's some differences and some disparities, just knowing, we had 357 students with disabilities that dropped out in the state of Nebraska in the 18-19 school year. So there's just there's some data and that tells us that better post-secondary planning leads to better outcomes. And that's, of course, what we want. So that's always a good reason, right? That's always a good reason. But, recently we've had a lot of districts undergoing some compliance reviews. Megan, let me guess, you've heard a little bit about the file reviews lately, right? So NDE has been engaging in their normal compliance reviews, but we've been getting some really detailed feedback about Indicator 13 or post-secondary transition planning. And so it was just a great time. The stars kind of aligned, and it was time to take a look at the form we were using, because, the thought was, if we're out of compliance in certain areas, is there something we could do that just makes it easier for case managers, teachers, and other staff to hit all the marks when it comes to being in compliance? And so Indicator 13 was a big piece. It's a very important source that we used, through some guidance and tact. And so that is really a really important reason for updating this right now, too. Now, you might have also heard LB 527 was recently passed. And that legislative bill maybe took a few of us by surprise. But again, great timing, because it now requires post-secondary transition plans to start at age 14, which is a little bit different than our previous guidance. And so NDE has come out with some guidance with this idea that now we need to start doing that transition planning a little bit earlier for students. And so we're going to be looking at age 14. And so this gave us a great opportunity to line up all of that work and revise the transition plan within SRS. So, Andrew, you might be thinking, what process was used, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll let everyone kind of read through this, but long story short, we did pull from a variety of really trusted resources. NTACT is the National Technical Assistance Center for Transition, and they have a ton of great resources, checklists, tons of case studies, just like great information. And so that really was the go-to source for making sure this revision checked all the boxes when it comes to compliance and quality. We also, of course, leaned in on the NDE guidance documents that are available to us. And so those are listed there. A lot of neighboring states had some great information. We found some fabulous samples. And one of the things that's been done by the Transition Advisory in the state was a review of other states' IEPs, which was super cool. So we got to see how other states in their template documents had laid out the post-secondary transition plan. And then, of course, our regional transition facilitators, Megan, who's one of them, they have a lot of great resources and information and technical assistance and training materials. And so those were drawn upon as well. And then really, we tried to get input from a variety of sources. We gave opportunities to share feedback to the SRS Advisory Committee, the regional transition facilitators, our NDE contacts. And then I think it's really important to mention that we did go through a really thorough legal review. ESUCC awesomely provided an opportunity for us to really go line by line and talk about the changes that were being proposed. And so feeling really good about the opportunity that, we got to kind of vet it through a variety of sources.
Gosh, it's always so important to have all your different stakeholders on board and bring a lot of voices and people and perspectives to the table. And so, yeah, I just really like the vision that's been put in place here with this post-secondary transition planning process. So I'll kind of set you up maybe to talk us through that.
Yeah, really, I know I talked about this, and Megan, I'd love for any input you have here in this section if you have a thought you'd like to share. But ultimately, we're going to go through the changes in SRS, but this is about solid transition planning, right? And that is a process. It's not just about the form. It's about the actions throughout the year that support transition planning. So you can see right there in the middle, underlined post-secondary transition planning. And then always at play are that student input and outside agency collaboration. That should kind of be involved in everything.
Yeah, I love this graphic. It does a great job of really putting the student at the center of the plan, which is what ultimately this needs to be all about, is the student and their goals and what they need to work on to reach those goals. I also love that it just goes in a constant circle. It's not a complete one thing, check it off the list and you're done with it. It's check it, move on, review it year after year and grow. And so we should really see some pretty amazing outcomes for students in the long run, because I want to say, being a little step ahead and doing best practices and starting younger so that these kids have an opportunity to plan and have the support they need to meet their end goal, which is being successful after high school.
Yeah, that's awesome, Megan. Well, and these are the big picture steps, right? Like there's lots of little stuff that's probably required in between, but really it's not that much different than how we might approach the IEP in general. So we've got up in that top right-hand corner, the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. I mean, we always got to start by assessing where we're at, right? And what the students' present levels and needs are at that point. Moving into age-appropriate transition assessments. Yes, I said assessments, more than one, and we'll hit on that later. That's kind of a big deal. Which then the assessment results then really help hone in on what the student wants to do after high school, what they want to do after they exit services from the public school district. And so those measurable post-secondary goals, of course, then you got to support those goals and support the student in achieving and getting to that. So we would head into transition services, including that courses of study. Then it supports the IEP goals in the annual. In the main section of the IEP also need to be linked to post-secondary goals. And then, of course, as Megan said, it's a process. We continue to it's cyclical, and we have to monitor how we did. We have to evaluate how things are going and then make changes so that we can really try to promote the best outcomes possible. So.
Terrific. And so where is a good starting point with all this then as you're kind of going through that?
Yeah, we are really excited to have Minh with us because he is an SRS wizard, and he is going to drive when it comes to just showing you what it looks like, what some of the revisions look like within the SRS IEP. Megan and I are going to kind of chime in here and there and just kind of focus in on some of the content. But really, with regard to getting started, the very first thing you got to do is that meeting notice. And so, Minh, while nothing's really new here, right, we are going to at least just point out and highlight where the post-secondary transition items are within that meeting notice.
Absolutely. So I've got one of my fake students, and we are on our development testing playground. So we are not on the actual SRS site. So we're going to take a look at the notice of meeting. And I have some information pre-filled. But whether you're holding a concurrent MDT and IEP meeting or just an IEP meeting, you need to invite the transition age student to the meeting. And when you check this box, it will print out on the IEP that they're going to be invited to the meeting. But as an extra layer of compliance, when this box is checked, or the one down here for just the IEP meeting, If you scroll all the way down to other participants, the student's name will be auto-filled into other attendees so that they are effectively invited twice on the same notice of meeting. Just in case lawyers don't accept the first one, they will accept this second invitation. And everything else is unchanged. And as it pertains to transition, on tab 3 of the notice of meeting, this is where you will invite outside agencies to the meeting as well. So you'll just check on this box and add an additional outside agency. You'll type in what the representative's name or agency is and check off the records that the parents can sign off to in releasing those records. In most cases, it's probably going to be all records, and then it's up to the parents to release consent or not. And that's about all there is as it pertains to the notice of meeting for transition age students. The rest of the form is unchanged.
You know, Megan, it's so important the student is invited and attends the IEP, true?
Absolutely. Like I said before, they are the center of the meeting, and they need to be part of those discussions. And letting them have a voice, because ultimately it's their plan, and so to have them be a part of that is great. I love the fact with this new SRS layout that the student is automatically invited, and then also that agency piece, because that often gets left behind and without the consent from parents, and so that it's all part of one, I think will really help districts meet that indicator 13 compliance.
So Min, the next section that actually has a change is, it's like new but not new, right? In our present levels section, we had just one text box really on tab 3 that addressed present levels, and many districts had kind of templates, or they would have, you know, some guidance for their users on what should go in there, and that is all very, very important. But we did, as a team, kind of decide to add another box. And so, Min, this is a snapshot of that new box on present levels. But essentially, it's giving a prominent and newly designated space for really discussing present levels as it relates to post-secondary transition planning. So we would, you know, there's some things that maybe were incorporated in the one text box previously that now just might be drawn out and highlighted in this section. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
I would say so.
And Megan, you know, there's lots of things that could be included in this section. So, you know, when it talks, the wording there you see refers to the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. And so, is there anything you want to share about that?
Absolutely. I really feel like this is a great place to highlight what the student can already do and what they like, you know, pulling in some of that assessment data and kind of putting it in a narrative form to say, you know, this is what the data showed, and this is what they want to do. And then also, for example, maybe you have a student who has helped out neighbors or something, but never had paid employment, and they really want to have a summer job because they're going to turn 16 and they can finally get paid. That would be a great place to say, you know, he needs to learn how to seek employment and how to fill out an application. It kind of helps map out the plan for what the transition services could look like on down the road. And it's just, you know, I think it again puts a spotlight on transition, and that we need to be putting extra attention on those things for the students.
That's awesome. So speaking of spotlighting transition, Min, there's a few other kind of like getting ready kinds of changes that maybe you could highlight walking through SRS. Like, for example, what happens when you create a new IEP?
That's right. So whether you are creating a new IEP through the Create Forms drop-down menu or duplicating a pre-existing IEP, we will get redirected to this new page where it will ask if the student is ready to begin transition planning. And you're going to encounter this question every single time until you select yes for this student. So for the purpose of this training, we're going to say that this student is starting their transition plan. And SRS will ask you, are you sure you want to do this? You can't go back afterwards, and you're going to have to add a transition plan to the IEP every year going forward. So we've created a new IEP. Everything's unchanged in tabs 1, 2, 2. But once we get to tab 3, here's the present levels of academic achievement. And right below is the post-secondary transition present levels. We just talked about that. But something that's really new is previously on the old IEP, tab 4 was where the annual IEP goals were located, and tab 5 is where the transition plan was located. We flipped those two around because the annual IEP goals should be considering the post-secondary transition services and goals. So we figured that should come first if you need to consider the transition plan when you're doing the annual IEP goals. We'll be going over the nitty-gritty details of the IEP transition plan in our next section, but I just wanted to show you that order has been changed. And when you go into the annual IEP goals, every goal is going to ask if that specific goal is supporting one of the students' transition services or goals, and you would just check off the things that they support, or if it doesn't support any of them, you would just leave it empty.
Yeah, and then you're right. We are going to get into more detail about some of the changes on the post-secondary transition plan. But, you know, for now, Megan, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Like you're just the information you rattled off when we were talking about present levels and the example you shared. I love that. I mean, there's always something that we can incorporate into that plan that paints the picture of where that student is at and where he or she wants to head. So, gosh, the transition facilitators are amazing across the state. You have a great group, don't you?
We have a fantastic group, and it's been kind of hard as we didn't really ever get to meet in person last year with COVID and everything, but we got together this summer, and it just solidified our group as a team, and we have some great plans moving forward, and we're excited to support the state with consistency and try and get a message out across that'll help support teachers and administrators to make it a little bit more understandable for their students. So thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and make sure that you stick around or try to access, I guess, training section 2. So that'll be coming up in the next video.